Fantastic. I didn't know you read Longfellow.
I read a lot.
I definitely know who it is, and I'm not very well versed. Hunter, maybe you could come over and help me straighten out my Longfellow.
Jeez.
Welcome to the Beacon House Podcast, recorded live in Knoxville, Tennessee.
And that's why I think that I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus is the best prologue to a murder-suicide.
Oh, wow. Whoa.
Wow. Okay.
That's heavy.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Casey gets right to it, doesn't he? Just going to let him...
Every time.
Beacon House.
Guys, welcome to another episode of the Beacon House Podcast. Sorry for your eardrums.
Sorry.
I'm one of your hosts, Casey.
Hey, I'm Spence.
I'm not Spencer. My name is Hunter.
And Hunter, we have a special guest. Do you want to introduce this special guest of ours?
This special guest has been on the podcast before.
Co-host.
It's their second time back. Yes, co-host. New terms, by the way, co-host. This is Senior Pastor Adam of Freedom Hope Church, who also happens to be one Adam Barnhart, my brother, from a while back.
That's right. Who told
Older brother time.
Who, if you go back to our archives, he told funny stories about Hunter when they were little. So, Adam, welcome back to Beacon House, my friend.
Well, thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah.
I got to start with something, though. Something's been on my heart all day and for about a week since I was asked to be here.
I feel like this is going to be...
And I don't want to get into all the heavy stuff because I realize that's just where I live and everything is super deep.
Made
and
fun of.
I want to start by telling Casey that I'm sorry.
Wait.
I didn't know you in the Big Brother episode. I had heard of you, and I was exceptionally hard on you, critical of you, and just downright rude to you. And I know that you're not a super sensitive guy, so it didn't bother you, but it bothered me to know that I had treated somebody that way. So I just want to leave that there, and we can move on to something fun.
I'm gonna give you the biggest hug after this podcast. I will say it's totally fine, and I knew it came from a good place because I know when someone like me with your little brother Hunter, when someone busts balls like we do, that it's a sign of affection. By the way, at Hunter's party, I think you were there for that. I picked him up over my shoulder at one point, and everybody went nuts on spanking Hunter for his birthday.
Got a lot of
spanking.
spankings.
I got my birthday spanks, and
I've never heard someone slap someone's ass so loud.
Like, let's put it this way. It was so extreme that Hunter's wife, Libby, actually went, "Hey, honey, are you okay?"
he hit the ground, and everyone crowded around him like he just got beat up.
But this is the thing. It was some of the most intense pain I've ever felt in my life. But because I can't hold alcohol and had 4 Trulies, I was gone. So by the time, I guess it was you, put me on the ground, I was okay.
You just admitted on the podcast to drinking 4 Trulies. You know that, right?
I'm diabetic. They can.
Hunter's like, I had a Zima and felt a little dizzy.
It's the only beer I can have.
Hey, are you guys going to finish those wine coolers?
Someone give me a Smirnoff Ice. I'm thirsty. Anyways, back to what me and Adam were talking about.
Sure.
Truly.
I knew it came from a good place, so it didn't. You're right. I'm not sensitive. It didn't hurt my feelings. I knew that we were just busting each other's balls. But I also understand why you're one to apologize, because I did run into you at McKay's a couple months later with my mom there, and I was like, yeah, this is Hunter's older brother, the one that was really mean to me on the podcast. And to watch the color leave your face as I was introducing you to my mom like that, and you went, well, I was like, I'm just kidding, buddy.
I think that I agree with everything you're saying, and it did come from a place of trying to be funny with you.
Yeah.
And I don't want to hijack this with all this really deep, like, philosophical internal dialogue. But the thing is, for me, it didn't come from a good place because I wasn't in a good place. And so I was leveraging this position as like funny guy / bully because I was so wounded. I didn't want anybody to say it to me. I didn't want anybody to come at me. And
that's deep.
Sir Henry Wadsworth Longfellow said, if you could look into the secret past of every man, you would find such pain as to disarm all hostility.
Henry Wadsworth Longfellow is a poet and a half. If you guys don't know who that guy is, just go look it up.
I don't know who that is, but after your brother just said that, I now want to go look up
He's
who
fantastic.
That is.
I didn't know
wonderful.
you read Longfellow.
I read a lot.
I definitely know who it is, and I'm not very well versed. Hunter, maybe you could come over and help me straighten out my Longfellow.
Jeez. It's okay, Casey. He's just busting my balls. I'm so sorry.
What I'm so happy about.
That's from a movie somewhere. That's from a movie. Oh, that's Rodney Dangerfield said that in some movie.
What I'm so happy about is
We
that
have a pastor
as Adam's or as Hunter's older brother, you get to come and experience other people be older brothers to Hunter as well.
No, I'm really grateful for you guys in a lot of ways. I know that, especially being that we have the history that we have, there's not been a whole lot of room to like reach out and talk about real life stuff. And I know you guys all cut up and give each other a hard time, but I know there's like a real bond here. I mean, there's a real brotherhood,
100%.
there's a real love for each other, and it's
I would
Elmer's
die for these
PVA
guys.
glue. Yeah.
it means a lot to me to know that he has that, because for a long time in my life I didn't have that. I mean, I was drawn to people who would be abusive to me in multiple ways, and we're not going to get into that, but just because I was comfortable being the whipping post, and that was all that I was comfortable with. And I really believe there's a crisis in our society today of people who are so beaten and so broken and so battered. And like, in order to just not deal with anything, we just accept it. And then we laugh and we say, oh, that doesn't hurt me. It doesn't affect me. And I don't know. And I'm not talking about toxic masculinity. I'm not talking about like we all have to hug each other every time we see each other.
Right.
But I'm desperate to get back to a society where it's also okay to compliment your friends. It's also okay
absolutely.
to encourage one another. And I just don't see that anywhere. I mean, it's like the new status quo is the more I insult you, the more I like you. And we wonder why this is the most depressed society the world has ever known.
Yeah.
We live in the land where anybody can do anything at any time if they work hard. And yet we're also the most medicated in all the world.
Well, let me ask you a question. You said something a minute ago. You said like you weren't in a good place and you were used to being the whipping post, and you just kind of stayed there. And let me ask you, what is your theory? How do people get there and stay there? Like, how come some people are so comfortable taking abuse and so comfortable in like unhealthy, debilitating relationships? And like, how does a person get there? And I mean, there's a lot of talk about how they get out of those. Like, you got to get back and you got to believe in yourself and seek truth and whatever. But how do people get like what do you think leads to that? I guess.
I would just like to add before any of this, for me personally, because I'm also one of those people that enjoy like being the whip post, being the easy target for jokes and stuff like that. It's way easier than the confrontation that if you weren't. Which is kind of a lazy answer, but really like it's way easier to just take it and let it roll off the shoulders than to try to come back and try to like argue the point and be confrontational about it.
But is it easy long term? I would ask that. I would go,
No.
Doesn't it long term? Doesn't it do something to your self esteem?
Yeah.
The thing is, for me, I was so sick. The confrontation wasn't the scary part. It was that I didn't have value enough to be the one to confront them on that.
That's huge.
Like why would they listen to me? Even if I say something, they obviously don't care or respect me enough because of how the relationship has been established to hear it. And then the few times, and those of us who know what I'm talking about know those moments where you finally do get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you speak up that one time, and that person just smashes you for ever even thinking that you could speak up. I mean, just destroys you. Now, I really appreciate your question, Spencer, and I'll tell you, having counseled several people over the last year, being a pastor, the most consistent thing that I have found, and this is what's so scary to me because of the society we live in, and so many children are raised in a home without a father, is a father wound. That is the most common underlying thing that I have come across with people. And when you grow up in a house, whether it's your father, your mother, your brothers, whoever it is that you look up to, because in every family there's somebody, right? I know people whose dad was gone, so they, as the oldest brother, had to be dad to the other siblings, this kind of thing.
Sure.
Whoever it is that took that role, whether it was a mom's boyfriend, an uncle that stepped into your life, whatever, whoever it was that took that role, they had the ability to make or break you in those most impactful years by either being an encourager, being someone who said you can do anything, the sky's the limit, reach for the stars, it's all there for you, or like,
what are you,
know
stupid?
Your role.
Yeah.
So for me, let me just tell you my story, and I hope that my dad never listens to this because I don't want to hurt him, and I can tell you a whole story about how his life has changed, and we have a relationship now, and it's beautiful. But at that point in my life, I had grown up. Mom and Dad got divorced when I was 13. I had taken to eating as a way to manage my depression, so I put on a bunch of weight. I actually used to be very fit. Mom would be in one ear, Dad would be in the other ear. But growing up, it was always from Dad, and I can still hear it today. You're never going to be anything. You're so stupid. Why would you do that? And his favorite was, there you go shooting your mouth off about something you don't know anything about. So I was left to feel like from a very young age, I had no value. Nothing I had to say had value. If I don't know everything there is to know about something, then I can't say anything at all about it. And so I grew up in that, and then I got around other people as I got older, started hanging out with the wrong crowds, and then so they would pile on, and I was around to be the guy to laugh at, to be the guy to pick on, to play pranks on, to bully, to treat this way. And most people who've known me in the I don't want to say this part of my life, but in the last few seasons of my life are like, I can't imagine anybody ever picked on you, like that was even a thing.
Sure.
But like it was. And so much of who I was, even the last time I was on the podcast, was literally just this tough exterior I had put up and had legitimately at a lot of points begged God to not let somebody press me, because then they'd find out it wasn't real. You know, I had all the tattoos, tattooed sleeves, and smoke and cuss and carry on and, you know, insult Casey left and right. And like, don't press me though, because if you push me, I'm not going to do anything. And then I'll be found out. And so to answer your question, for me, it was a father wound. It was the reality that from a young age, I had felt like I didn't have anything to offer anybody. I wasn't anything. I was just this idiot kid who doesn't know any better and doesn't have a reason or a right to say anything. And so I kind of walked around and accepted that was my lot in life. And so I picked friends who saw me that way and reminded me that was my role. And served them to the best of my ability to serve them, and being their whipping post. And the journey out of that is a little bit different, and it's kind of the whole journey that brought me to a real relationship with Jesus. But we can do that another time. But so yeah, that's kind of my story. So I think what gets us there, I really do think it starts when we're young. I really, really do.
Yeah.
And I think that we need somebody in our life to be an encourager. And I get frustrated because, like, my grandmother was one of my greatest encouragers. Mm-hmm. But when you see somebody for 4 days a year, you can't undo all that. And one of my best friends in the world, I won't say his name for well, reasons. You don't need to know why, but reasons. I won't say his name, but he's actually a clinical therapist. He's a psychologist. That's what he does. And so we've had a lot of dialogue about these things, and he said, and I don't know what the number is, but it takes X amount of positive reinforcement to undo one negative statement.
Right.
And all of us know that that's true, because if we think about it, we can immediately call to mind. If I asked you for 4 terrible negative experiences, you'd have them. And if I said, what are four really good things, like stand apart, like really awesome things, most people look at me and go,
Yeah, exactly.
And so for some reason, the negative just seems to stick with us a whole lot more than the positive. And so when you have a majority of negative and minimal positive, that becomes your reality.
Well, I also think it's interesting that you brought up that it's not a place from toxic masculinity. It really is just like when you're with your boys, you can't be sensitive. And it's not a thing of toxic masculinity. It's just that's what dudes have been brought up not to do.
Yeah.
And I don't think it comes from a place of toxic masculinity. It's just something that we grew up with. Like, it's just, you're not allowed to share your feelings with your boys. But I don't know, like, I guess we're special people because I have no problem opening up to these two dudes.
And I'll tell you what, man, it kind of works the other way too. Like it's when people talk about toxic masculinity, and that's generally when I feel like they're talking about guys that are macho and possibly the bully complex and all that sort of thing. It's this untruth that men don't have feelings and that guys can't be emotional. Guys don't cry. Big boys don't cry, blah, 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 and all that kind of thing. But there's also kind of a flip side to that too, is that if you're going to be brave enough to be emotional and be vulnerable, which is really the ultimate truth, when you can be around friends or you have a significant other, a wife or whatever, that will allow you to actually be vulnerable in front of them and not judge you for it and not, it doesn't change how you look in their eyes. That's true connection. Like that's the real thing. But so many times, when the terrible thing is when you are vulnerable and when you are emotional, like if you're a guy, at least, I can't speak from the other way. But when you are emotional and you are vulnerable, a lot of people find you way less charismatic and way less attractive and way less encouraging, and people just don't want to be around you when you look broken. You know what I mean? Like if you and maybe we all know somebody, but if you've got that guy that's always just like having a crisis or something like that, or a friend, it doesn't mean you don't love him, but like you tend to not want to just go see him every day when
you
it's
assume
always
baggage with it. You don't want to.
Yeah, like that. And what's terrible is that person probably needs empathy. They probably need all that kind of. So there's this weird thing about it's not just the person that's having the problem. It's our job, I think, as like a society to kind of not turn our back on people that are having trouble or struggling or whatever like that. So you've kind of got to, it's got to be an acceptance and kind of an honesty too, you know, on the other side.
Well, I also feel like you need to be careful because there are some people who are negative all the time, but they've learned that that's how they get compliments. Mm-hmm. And so they will be purposely overly negative. I guess you'd call them like an energy vampire. Like they show up to a big group of everybody being happy and go lucky and suck the energy out of the place because it makes them feel better. So you got to really learn the difference between someone like that and someone who actually needs the help.
There's something I say all the time that I've found to be very true in my life, and that's that there's a big difference between being vulnerable and being a victim.
Yeah.
There's a big difference.
Yeah.
And so if you get around that kind of person who is a victim, no matter what the circumstance, no matter who, you know, they could have been 100% responsible, and they will spend all day telling you how the world is against them and everything's unfair. And that's totally different. And those are energy vampires. And even being a pastor, I know I'm just saying this to set some people at ease. The reality is I have to be careful about who I spend my time with, because there are those people who just want you to come and share with them in their suckiness, I guess, is the best way to put
Their
it.
Misery or whatever.
So when somebody is truly vulnerable, though, here's the key for me. When somebody is truly vulnerable, it's because they're seeking a way out.
Yeah.
When someone is a victim, it's a pattern that you see time and time again. There's never a change in their life. There's never a willingness to change. And you know these people because when you talk to them, if you ask simple questions, I try to solve problems through questions because I want people to come and work it out on their own. I think that's the most beneficial for people. So when somebody says to me like, man, I can't pay all my bills and I'm struggling, I can't get my money figured out. And I go, okay, so what did you spend money on this month? And they're like, man, that doesn't matter. You know, I just always get a bad break in my job. So it becomes pretty apparent to me pretty quickly when we're not looking for a way to be better with our money. We're looking for someone to come alongside us and say, yeah, man, the world's done you dirty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a big difference there. And so talking about toxic masculinity, my point is you can still insult one another if that's the way you and your friends choose to be with each other. But I'm saying as often as you say, you know, like I'll pick on myself, hey, Adam, you look like a dork with your glasses instead of your contact lenses. You could also say, hey, man, I really, really appreciated what you said the other day. You know, I really needed that encouragement. You wouldn't know that if I didn't tell you.
Right.
And there's nothing about that somehow demasculates you.
No, it's very admirable when somebody can just be honest and go, hey, man, I really appreciate that thing you did. And in gratitude, there's so much power in gratitude. We always talk about this, but like I've told a lot of people that work for me, you know, like when they have like a little disagreement or something like that, and then one of them will come back and go, hey, listen, I'm sorry. I'm like, that's so huge that you're not afraid to apologize. There's so much power in an apology and so much power in gratitude. They're gigantic, and people are terrified of having to say, I'm sorry or thank you. You know, for some reason, like, why do you think people feel weak?
I'm convinced that ownership is a problem, period. I'm convinced that the idea that I'll pick on me, that Adam could be the sole cause of his own problem. That maybe my attitude, maybe it's not that the world is against me, maybe I just treat people poorly. And so everybody hasn't, you know, Spencer and Casey and Hunter didn't get together and go, hey man, let's get against Adam. Maybe I just was not good to you one-on-one and not good to you and not good to you. And the sum total of my behaviors and my decisions, my language, my attitude, my thoughts, the way I carried myself, maybe the sum total of that is not what I wanted it to be. And so the thing is, though, and this is so key for me, I think that intellectually, emotionally, and physically, we're also the laziest society that I have ever seen. Even like I'm in seminary right now, finishing up, and like so I have studied some ancient cultures. Okay, like the laziest society, emotionally, intellectually, and physically. And the reality is this: it's work to look in the mirror and go, I don't like that about me, and I'm going to do something. I don't like that I treat people that way. I don't like that I judge people so quickly.
Right.
And so I'm going to be different from now on. And then to understand that because I treated Spencer and Casey and Hunter poorly, it doesn't matter if I'm nice one time. Like I have to present to them a pattern that they can then sink their teeth into. And here's the problem. I come to you and I go, hey man, I shouldn't have been like that. And then if we're not complete clean slate, if you don't completely forgive me, completely take me back in and give me a brand new, then it's like, I'm not doing it. It's not worth it. It's too much work. It's asking too much. And who is he to sit on the throne above me and tell me that I have to do this and this and this to earn it? But the reality is nobody in here has been burned one and done. That's a hard truth for people to grasp. Sometimes things happen. I have to counsel people through infidelity. Let's talk about that in marriages. How about the reality that, yes, maybe the husband or the wife did something outside of the marriage, but they didn't wake up that day and go, hey, I'm going to do this. Like, okay, the reality is there were some things going on before that ever occurred. Now, I'm not talking about fault necessarily. I'm just saying, like, it didn't just go there.
Yeah, okay. I get that.
Yeah.
And so my point is the same is true. Like you ask, why is it so scary to say you're sorry? Because I'm sorry is the first step in a journey that's going to take some work.
Yeah.
If I don't say sorry, then I can sit still and just be a victim.
Oh, that's huge. That is I'm so glad you said that. That's gigantic. And I'm not targeting anybody or necessarily leveraging that at our listeners or whatever. But I think anybody that's working in society right now has to kind of observe that it's easy to be a victim and it's hard to say I'm sorry. And it is the beginning of a journey to get back to wherever. And I agree with you too. I will say this, to your point about how we're the laziest society, physically, emotionally, and intellectually. I'm here to, I really, that's huge. And I think people need to observe that just because we have Google doesn't mean we're smart. It just means we have access to a lot of things.
Sure.
But it's just like it's like imagine if you had a bunch of Legos on this table. You start out with just like 300 years ago, maybe you only had 10 Legos and you had to do whatever you could with that. But think what kind of creativity that would create. And think of all the ways you'd have to think outside of the box to take these. Now, we graduate up and now we have a whole table full of Legos. We have unlimited Legos. They're falling out of the sky. All this information, it's just raining down on us. But that doesn't mean we know how to put it together. It doesn't mean that we're any better at reasoning and logic and any of that kind of stuff. Like real intelligence has nothing to do with like how much access you have to the internet. We feel like we're such a super informed society, and we are very informed. But again, that intellectually, I don't think that's the same thing. I think intellectually, you've got to be able to think like you did. Like you've got to take a hard look in the mirror and go, okay, what's the real? If you seek truth, we talk a lot about like trying to seek truth, and the truth is not always easy, but it's the truth. So you kind of got to decide when you're not afraid to the truth anymore and you really want to go look for it. Most people, I think, are running from the truth because it's scary.
Well, it's seldom easy, but always worth it.
Yeah,
I
agree.
Back in the day, I would say maybe 10 plus episodes ago, we had someone ask us a question, or we had a question during one of the mailbags, where it was if you could go back in time and tell your younger self something that, not like money or, stock, what have yous to make yourself rich, but like actual something you've learned to tell your younger self so they don't make the same mistakes, what would it be? And I think I made some joke, but then I came back and actually had a serious question or serious answer, which was I would tell myself that being negative and being cynical isn't as cool as you think it is. Like growing up, I like when I worked at books back in the day, I thought being cynical and like having this broody negative attitude was really cool. And instead, I just gave myself a bad habit of being negative and having a negative outlook on life. Mm-hmm. And I think since then, I've been trying to like change that and be better about not being so cynical. I know a lot of people think I have a lack of empathy, but empathy?
I think you're looking for empathy.
I think apathy is lack of empathy.
There you go. But it's something that I've like looked to fix or like trying to like do better. But that goes to what you're saying. Like I found something, I looked in the mirror and been like, being negative, being cynical about the world is not helping anybody, and it definitely isn't as cool as I think it is. Especially when you're 30.
And I want to say, that doesn't mean there's not a place for like lighthearted cynicism. Like in fact, if you look at it in kind of a roundabout way, if you're kind of cynical, but it's funny and other people learn and get a laugh out of it, then that's a very positive thing. And you made a couple of people happy, as long as it's not deep, like really discouraging cynicism.
Well, I got to a point where I was almost nihilistic. And so that's where I was like, maybe I should rear back a little bit. Maybe I should pull the reins on this
But see, I'm not gonna question you on this or push you on this. But my experience has been that when cynicism, when negativity, when those type of behaviors become our identifiers, not a part of our personality, but the driving force of our personality, it's really just armor. That's what I've discovered. And I'm not saying I want to get into your history. You have to,
no, you're fine.
Almost everybody that I've talked to, if we talk long enough, we'll get to a place where we realize that just was armor. And it was kind of like what I'm admitting. I'm not saying it's the same for you, but it's like, I'm going to get you before you get me. I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to cut you. I'm going to shut you down. Even if I do it in a way that's just playful, like what my goal is to get us off of this topic and onto something else before I get exposed.
I think at one point it was probably armor, and now it's just become my sense of humor. It's what
I would agree with that.
It's what I identify my humor as. Like I find humor in the negative because so many people try to like just really dig in deep on the negative to find like the sadness of it, and I want to find what makes people laugh about tragedy because for me, like, you know, when I've had people pass away and things like that, I always want to remember the funny stories about them, like the funny memories about them, because I find in laughter you can remember in love and respect and come together better than to share sadness with it.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
And
Yeah, no, it does.
And they say that music is like the universal language. I think not everybody necessarily feels that way, but I think laughter is definitely a universal language. It's like if people can get tickled, you automatically get a bond. Even if you make a joke about something that's kind of negative or cynical, or it might even be like kind of a edgy joke that's possibly like inappropriate or culturally insensitive or something like that. But if you can get people laughing, then they kind of are. I feel like it disarms them from a lot of their preconceived notions and stuff that we have more of that today than ever. I think, you know, like people have more reasons to not sit down and talk in 2019. Probably than I've ever seen in my lifetime. Maybe a couple hundred years ago it was really bad for some reason, but I think laughter unites a lot of people, and I think it's important. I wanted to ask you something.
Sure.
You and I'm talking to Adam here. You said
Spencer pointed at Adam for those of you listening.
Thank you.
It's a visual podcast.
Paint a picture here for us. You said you were talking about stuff you have to counsel people through, like infidelity. Sure. What are some other really tough things that you've had to counsel people through, and maybe just give us a take on some of that stuff and how you approached it, kind of.
Sure. So one of the most difficult things that I try to counsel people through, because I don't want to present myself as some guru, because I'm not. But one of the hardest things, I think, is people who deal with legitimate depression and anxiety. I think that, so a marriage that's falling apart often, if in all things, let me say this first. I want to make a little bit of a broad stroke here, but in all things, it's teachability. That's step one. If you are not willing to receive information, if you're not willing to look and listen and partake in counseling, it's legitimately, in my opinion, and in most cases, just a waste of time. If your goal is to walk in and have me tell you how great you are and how wrong the other person is, you're not going to like me. Like, that's just not how it's going to. So if you're teachable, if you're humble, if you really are willing to try to get on the other side of this thing, and you say, Pastor, I don't have a clue what I should do. I don't know what it looks like, but I cannot live here anymore. I can't do that anymore. If that's your heart and that's your attitude, then I think the sky's the limit, because I can take that couple and we can go back in time. What is the last time you remember both of you legitimately being happy? And we can work forward, and usually we can find the crack. Usually we can find where something went kind of awry. And this is the thing. I'm kind of getting off topic here a little bit, but I wanted to touch on this, on what he was saying earlier, what Casey was saying earlier. I pointed at
Adam pointed at Casey.
So I have found, and I want to be really careful, because a lot of what I'm telling you has been true for me in my experience, but I have not been all over the world. I don't know every person, and I don't want to present this information as like this is the be-all, end-all, this is it. But my experience has been that often the funniest guy in the room is also the most hurt.
Yep.
That has so often been my experience. And so usually, like when I go into a room now, if I find the guy who's really the life of the party, I'm so drawn to him, not because he's the life of the party, but because I desperately want him to know, like, man, I care about you. Like, I just need you to know that, like, I care. And and most of them are very cynical when it comes to counseling, because they've had a whole lot of people tell them for a very long time, well, just stop being depressed.
Right, exactly.
Like that's just kind of, and they don't necessarily, maybe they're not that callous about it, but it's like, oh, well, if you feel bad, then you just need to think happy thoughts. Or if you're having a rough day, you can't stay inside with the blinds drawn and the lights off and just stay in the bed. But I know people personally who literally cannot get out of bed.
Right.
Like I want the blinds opened. I want to get out of bed and I can't do that.
There's definitely a crippling form of depression.
So that, I think, is probably the hardest thing to counsel someone through, because those people, in my experience, want it as bad as anybody. But there's something in them that just fights it. And the greatest success that I've seen, in all honesty, is when I can take the focus, and I think this is true for all aspects of life, let me just tell you. Mm-hmm. But when we have breakthrough, it's when we get to that place where I go, okay, I get it. You're struggling. It's real. Now, it's not about you.
And that's apparently with like 12-step programs, that's a huge part, is when they finally, like, you do this like fearless moral inventory, and then later you stop making yourself responsible for all your problems. And it either ascribe it to a higher power or just the relentless, whatever, but you realize there's something bigger than you, and you're not the center of the universe. And
it's a totally different way to look at things. And I don't want that to get lost. And I don't want to hijack the whole episode and make this a sermon.
I'm okay with it. Like it again, we're not trying to offend anybody, but everybody's allowed to voice their opinion and their experiences, their personal experiences here. This is a totally free talking platform.
Yep.
And you said some really, really enlightening things before we started recording, and I wouldn't mind if you touched on some of that. Like talking about some of the biggest problem with church these days are people that are Christians sometimes, and they've been burned by. I mean, go ahead, get into it.
Everybody knows that Mahatma Gandhi said, "I would be Christian if it weren't for the Christians."
Right.
So, and most people hear that and go, "Yeah, I get it." The problem is most Christians hear that and go, "God, I'm glad I'm not like them."
Well,
really.
Yeah.
And it's really bothersome to me. So here's what I feel like God has put on me as part of my ministry at Freedom Hope Church. We're out in Oak Ridge. Quick plug. I hope that's okay.
Plug.
But so my whole goal is that people would understand that the Jesus that I read about in the Bible and the God that I worship is a God of love first. In Romans 5:8, it says that God shows his love for us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So why then, as Christians, is our love determined by your actions as someone who doesn't know Jesus? Why does that determine my action? If Jesus can do what he did when I didn't deserve it, didn't even want it, I didn't have a relationship, I didn't care, I didn't want anything to do with him.
Right.
And he can go to the cross, then how can I say I represent the same God when I want to send you to the cross while I sit here and cast judgment?
That's huge.
So my heart...
How's that jerky?
I'm so sorry. I haven't eaten all day, and Casey gave me this jerky, and it's incredible. But please don't.
If you could see Spencer, he is enthralled.
I look like a chipmunk.
But he's got cheeks stuffed with jerky
God,
right
it's
now.
so good. I'm so hungry.
My whole heart in this ministry, bar none, is to lead with love. To lead with love in all things. And so I'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek, something I was telling the guys. Can't tell you the name or anything yet, but we're working on a project out through the church for a podcast. And one of the things we're going to do is we're not going to open the scripture and then read scripture over the air to everybody and just give. There's plenty of that. What I want to do is I want to dialogue with people who are not Christians. I want to dialogue with people who are not of the same political persuasions or ideologies. I want to talk to people. I would love to talk to people that are a part of the LGBTQ community and really passionate about that, because my hope is that we can see that nowhere in Scripture am I given the command to fix anybody. I am given the command to love everybody. What I want to do is not have an evangelism, microphone fight, so to speak. I don't want to get in a room and argue with people. What I want people to see is that you can believe something different than me, and you can have a different heart than me, and you can live a lifestyle that is sin to me. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is sin. But we can still have dialogue. I can still love you. We can still have a conversation. We can find the things that unite us. We can have dialogue about that, develop a relationship, and then my job is covered as long as I have loved you well. But when I try to fix you instead of trying to love you, at that point, I'm not Christian anymore. That's abiblical.
Yeah. Like the people that say pray the gay away, and that whole thing where and I'm not even saying I'm not an expert in that field, but I don't know if maybe that is possible. It seems unlikely to me, but at the same time, that's the kind of stuff that make people in the LGBTQ community just run from church. And they're just so sick and tired of the condemnation, and there's no fellowship in it. Nobody's welcoming them, and just exactly what you said. There's supposed to be so much love, and you just don't see it. You see like real harsh judgment, and I think again, almost all of those people that are outside of the church for various reasons. It might just be some a person that's an atheist that's just been not turned on to religion their entire life. They just don't dig it, and it just seems like whatever's keeping them away from it. Because every time they get close to it, somebody tries to fix them. And I totally get it. Nobody just goes, hey, man, what's up? I will say this, to give a compliment to Hunter, he's always, I feel like, done it the right way and never been like judgmental. And he's always been super welcoming. And anybody we've had come in this room and sit in that chair, he's always cool to them, no matter what they think. We've had plenty of people in here that were atheists, you know?
Yeah.
And there's never a fight. There's never anything like that. And he always just says the same thing. Hunter just goes, well, there's a seat open for you at church if you ever want to come. You know, just nice guy, inviting and not judgmental, not fixing anybody. And I think, you know.
So I'm doing a good job.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Dude, absolutely.
Well, that's born from having been, because I don't think we've ever gotten into it on the podcast, and I'll spare details, but what made me leave church years and years and years ago and start a snowball thing where I lost my faith completely until I found it years after the fact was simply going one day and being like 12 or 11. I was really young, but I was in a mood and I was tired. And I literally, in being greeted by one of the pastors that was supposed to like oversee the kids for that day, he didn't like that I was in a mood and tired, and held me out in front of the class and embarrassed me for it. And right there, I was like, fuck all of you guys, and just was gone. So I've been there, and in between, you know, Mom, God bless her, was every week, well, you're coming to church, right? Coming to church. And that drives me up a wall too. Just open and she knows it. I love you, Mom. Thank you. But,
I love you too, Mom.
But just the Bible thumping, or the you got to go. You can think that. I think church is good for people, but I have been there. I know exactly why you would go and decide not to. So I think it's stupid to presume that you can just fix somebody.
I also come from a family where my grandfather, my mom's dad, was the pastor in one of the largest churches in Columbia, South Carolina, Saxagatha. And he even told me at one point, was basically along the lines of, you don't have to go to church. It'd be great if you'd come, but I get it. If you don't want to go, don't go.
Yeah.
He's like, forcing it on you is never going to work. Like, you got to want it. Mm-hmm. And so that's just the lifestyle like I had growing up. My entire family, when I was younger, I always had to go to church every Sunday. And then it got to the point where I was like 11 or 12 and could stay home by myself. And then it got to the point is, do you want to go?
Yeah.
No. Fine. No problem. And it was never like a shameful thing. You know, you're going to church. How dare you? It was, I get it.
Mm-hmm. Once again, there's that condemnation that doesn't, it's not going to make anybody want to go to church more.
It does the opposite.
And I will say, growing up, my parents were very big into question everything.
Our mom was the same way.
It was whatever you read, whatever you see, whatever you think and do, question it all, be curious, think for yourself. Don't let others think for you.
Yeah, I remember when I was young, I remember coming home from school one day, and I stayed with my grandmother sometimes till my parents got off work. And it was the first time I was ever at odds with like the creation story and like evolution, and I hadn't put it all together yet, like how I felt about dinosaurs and the earth, the age of the earth versus like 7 days of, Adam and Eve, and just the whole 9 yards, like all of it. And I asked my grandmother, I said, well, hey, which version of the story is correct? And she did the smartest thing. She literally just kind of looked at me, and she could see I was very curious, and she said, here's what's important. It's important to keep an open mind. And then she didn't give me a finite answer. And I think she kind of knew that I would eventually put it all together if I wasn't closed off to possibilities and things like that. And I did. I eventually, I was real heavy into theology for about 12 years, and I read a ton of stuff. I read C.S. Lewis, George MacDonald, like the whole 9 yards, and and a bunch of other stuff too. And I just kind of formulated my belief structure. Never dogmatic, always based on like love and charity and doing nice things for other people. You know what I mean? And not condemnation and all that. So I think it's important. And I just want to say, I mean, it's Christmas. And so like, I just want to say to everybody, like, you know, if you've been burned by church, like I'm sorry that happened to you. And if you choose never to go back, or if you never went in the first place, whatever, that's okay. Like, but we're still going to give a damn about you. And we're going to try to be an example, not be the wrong kind of guys, you know?
100%.
I will say, final plug for Freedom Hope. As far as the church thing goes, since we're in that season, and this is the time where people that never go decide they might again, if you're thinking about it, go and hope it works out for you. If it doesn't, know that everyone in the world sucks and we're all just trying to suck less, you know, as individuals together.
If you haven't gotten anything from listening to this podcast, you should understand if you do go, if you just want to check it out, if you just want to sit there and nobody's selling you anything, nobody's like, you just want to go and see what it's all about, this would be a great opportunity to do. I mean, you can hear from the way he talks, like, this is the real deal. I mean, he's got it all. In my opinion, you've got your head screwed on so straight about people and seriously.
Well, I was going to recommend Freedom Hope. That was the thing. Specifically, and the reason is that, for anyone listening, Adam being my older brother and the head pastor of the church was a big old red flag for me. And I was like, I want nothing to do with that.
That's crappy. That's crappy of you. It's
Good
Christmas.
job.
Shitty little brother.
I was like,
you're a turd of a little brother.
I'm not going to visit. I don't want to do it. It's you do your thing. I think you're good for it. I think you're good at it. Not interested. Libby and I go a couple times. And Libby, after, I think when you got your space, on the ride home goes, you know, we were talking about how it was really good, and Adam is really good at pastoring all that stuff and teaching the scripture and all the things that you would hope a church would be.
Right.
So we're talking, and she goes, how do you feel about this being our home church? Because we've been shopping. And I was like,
right.
And she goes, it's okay if you don't want to. I mean, that's your call, but I think this could work. And I really thought about it, and I was like, the truth is, I don't like my brother being my personal senior pastor because we carry baggage into the relationship with each other. So I can't come with a blank slate and learn and grow through faith with this person is what I was thinking. I was like, but in the time that we've been shopping, I have not been filled up and fulfilled as a Christian seeking someone to just kind of plug into my life at all, anywhere near the way that I was when we would visit Adam's church. And that's not a knock on the other ones, but I was just like, I don't want to go here. But it's the place where I get the most out of it. And it's the place where I feel the most at home.
That's huge.
So we wound up doing it. It was and that was with me kicking and screaming all the way.
You know, as crappy as that sounded a little bit at first, that's actually the most powerful endorsement.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah. He's really good. It's worth it.
So there's something else on my heart as we talk about church, and you don't have to come to mind. It would be my heart's cry that everyone here would find a church to plug into. And there's plenty of good churches. There's plenty of good pastors.
Absolutely.
And there's
let me give a shout out to Awaken Church, both out west and down in the old city. One of my best friends, Adam Lutz, he's eventually going to be a guest on this podcast too. And he and I,
Pastor Adam.
He and I have a ton of funny stories from when we used to work together too. So it'd be not necessarily just a church-based podcast, but again, yes, I would send anybody that was curious or looking or just seeking or whatever to your church or Adam's church, other Adam's church.
There's enough pastors out there who try to put on the air that I've got it figured out. I'm good, do what I do, and I think it's important to lead. I think it's important to set an example for your people. I do. But one of the things that I'm very open with people about is that I'm a regular guy. I have tattoos, I have bad habits, I use foul language sometimes. I'm not proud of any of that. But I'm not going to ever try to get up there and present myself as some guy who's got it all figured out and has all the answers and there's nothing left for me to learn. I'm on this journey too. And what I want is for people to come alongside us and be on the journey with us. And so one of the things that I was talking to a very special young lady, shout out Abigail, the other day about was, and I believe this so wholeheartedly, and I wanted to ask you guys, I was so excited when Casey invited me back. So put that put that in your bank vault there. That Casey is the one who invited me back for the Christmas episode, knowing that I'm a pastor and all that. So all of you who think that nobody can have a relationship, and
I do make good choices,
and nobody can be decent and get along, I just wanted to throw that out there. So thank you for inviting me back. But just a quick question that I had for you guys, because I believe this to be true, and I've learned this, especially being a pastor. I believe wholeheartedly that the two most stifling things to creativity are school and the church.
You're asking if we agree with that?
I'm asking your thoughts on that.
Man,
I think it's 110% true. In both cases.
I'd say if you're talking about like institutions that stifle creativity, that's hard to argue with. If we were talking about like personal habits, there's a lot of things I think that might stifle creativity.
I think negativity, but I mean, I guess that's a given. Mm-hmm. Like when you create something and then show it off and somebody's just like, I could do better. It's like, that's not why I showed you this thing. And the negativity doesn't help. So it's like, anytime Hunter shows me something, like I posted a picture on the internet. I don't know if I could find it now of, it's a little internet comic of somebody being like, oh, I drew this thing, I want to share it, but I feel like nobody wants to see it. And then like a friend kicks the door open, grabs it, presses send, posts it, and it's like comments, I freaking love this. And then I love you, quit second guessing yourself, post everything. I want to see it all.
But see, that's the point. And being that it's Christmas time, I'm going to say this is a little sneak peek. If anybody comes, we have an 11 p.m. service Christmas Eve going into midnight. So we'll finish Christmas morning at midnight out at the church, and you guys are welcome to come. I'm sure everybody's super busy, but I'm just throwing that out there. But I'll give you a little sneak peek into what I'm going to preach on. So one of the responses to Jesus being born was King Herod, and he put out a decree that we were going to start, that he wanted to find Jesus, and he was going to murder him, right? Because the reality is all of us have a tendency to take that response when our throne feels threatened. And so going to what you're saying, 9 out of 10 times, that's why I say that the most negative person is the most hurt person. And it's because we have envisioned in our minds that anybody who ever did anything better than us, preached a better message than me, made a better video than you, does better at music than you, or is a better singer than you, like our first thought, and if you're really real with yourself, I think most of us would admit this. When we hear it, our first thought is, man, that's good. And then we start wondering, is it better than me? Is it better than what I do?
Absolutely. 100%, yeah.
And so I listen to other pastors, and they'll preach an awesome sermon. I'm like, man, that's good, and I'm awful.
I will say that's exactly my mind. Like, man, this is good. Is it better than me? But then right after that, my next thought is, I pull them aside and go, how did you do that thing? Like
that's exactly what
I'm
you
like,
want.
I'm like, ooh, I was like, that thing you did is beautiful, and I want to know. Like, I don't want to steal it, but I want to know how you did it because I love that.
And that's the heart, that's the level of maturity that I'm seeking to get my people at Freedom Hope to. As a shepherd, if you will, that I want my flock to be at that place where it's not sinful to have that thought, but it's sinful to make that your life choice.
Yeah.
So if you see the video and instead of saying, man, that was really good, and I don't know if I could do it that well, can you give me some pointers? Can you tell me what you did? Like, that's a great dialogue. And what happens as a result of that is relationship. And this is what's so cool for me. It removes all the pressure. There's no longer from that moment forward, there's not really that enmity or that Competition, thank you. That competition where it's like we're looking at each other's stuff and trying to figure out whose is better. Instead, now I don't feel threatened by you because you've complimented my work. You don't feel threatened by me because obviously you're asking me for input. And so now we move forward in this crazy newfangled thing in 2019 called a relationship.
Oh my God,
Two
God
dudes?
forbid.
And then we have a relationship. And now this is when some of the greatest things in the world come about. What if we collaborate on something? What if I show you some of my tricks, you bring some of your equipment?
Dude, I will tell you this, to kind of to that point, I'll make an example. And I do, man, when I was learning music and I was a lot younger and I was learning music as a kid, I was super competitive, hyper competitive even. A lot of people may not have seen it, but I was harboring it. And like, if I saw somebody else that was like a really good guitar player, like, I mean, he was my enemy. I was out to get him. Like, and I don't know why I felt that way. I just felt like I had to be so good. I had put a lot of pressure on myself. I had to be so good that I couldn't be shown up by anybody else, which is ridiculous. It's ridiculous when you get to that point in music because it's different. Nobody's the best, nobody's the worst, and everybody has a different voice. And you really should be striving to find your own sound, your own voice, so that you can communicate to people authentically. And that's about as good as a musician can get. But I didn't know that. And I will never forget one of the best guitar players I ever heard in my entire life. And he's now one of my absolute best friends. And you guys know him, Eric Stam. He's been on this podcast. Yeah. And it's weird that people have heard Stam on here talking about football or they've seen him. But Eric Stam is a musical genius. Mm-hmm. And when I was working at Guitar Center a long time ago, and I didn't know him, he came in, and I just heard this sound from around the corner of this guy playing the guitar. And I instantly knew whoever that is over there, they're better than me. I just knew it. I was like, whoever that is insane. But it was so captivating that I went running around the corner, and Eric Stam was sitting there. A much younger, shyer version of Eric Stam.
With hair?
I think at the time I had hair. And I literally, as bad as I wanted to be threatened by it, and again, Stam is such a nice guy that he doesn't give off this.
It's hard to, yeah.
It'd be hard to just be crappy to him, unless you're kidding, which we do a lot. But what I'm saying is like, man, I was just like, how do you do that? How are you doing that? What are you doing? And we were buddies ever since then. And there was never a competition. We've been in a bunch of bands together, and like he did his thing, I did my thing. And it turned out I was good at some things too that weren't exactly his. And we're very different kind of musicians. But if my whole point is if I would have let my ego get out there and just like, hey man, could you turn that down? Like if I would have been embarrassed, like somebody's going to hear that guy and they're going to know he's better than me and blah, blah. I would have missed out on one of the best friends I've ever had in my entire life. And it turned out our friendship is way bigger than our musical capacity. Mm-hmm. We share a lot of musical stuff, but if both of us had our hands cut off and couldn't play guitar anymore, we would still be friends.
Yeah.
For a long time. So to your point, that's gigantic to not let your whatever, to go to somebody and not make everything a competition and just to try to like unite with people and you grow and you learn. I've learned a lot from him. That he's helped me become a way better musician, you know.
He's opening up vocal stuff for Burn the City right now.
Yeah, that's how smart Stam is. He's not just a one-trick pony. Like I'm basically barely a functioning guitar player, but he's like an arranging genius. He's good at mixing. He's good at writing harmonies. He understands classical theory. Mm-hmm. It's all kinds of crazy stuff. Like shout out Stam.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say anything else nice about him.
Merry Christmas, Stam.
Shout out. That's it. No more compliments.
Give me your keys. You're drunk.
So hey, real quick before we wrap up, and I feel like this is like a 10-parter that we could go to. I really do. Like
I said that when I didn't get invited back a year ago.
You got to come back and we've got to finish it up. But
we'll have you back in a year.
See y'all next Christmas.
Tell everybody how to find your church and how to find you. And for our people that would like to talk to you a little more or deserve, they need some kind of counseling about something. Sure. How do they find you? Where's the church at? And how can they find you online and that sort of thing?
Sure. So the church is located in Oak Ridge. We're in the Grove Shopping Center right now. We're actually fixing to move. That's kind of a secret thing, though, so don't tell anybody. But I'm just kidding. But we are fixing to move. But we're in the Grove right now Shopping Center. You can go to freedom-hope.com. The website's up and running. There's a link you can click on there just to drop a message. And I've never done this before, but I'll go ahead and do it. If anybody needs anything or just wants to reach out, my personal email is pastoradam@freedom-hope.com. And you can send any of your email requests there. If you need someone to talk to, want someone to reach back out to you, just drop me a line, leave me your number, tell me what's going on. I'll be glad to reach out to anybody.
And I would further encourage our listeners to maybe pass that along to a friend. Mm-hmm. So nobody listening to this right now might have something immediately they need help with, but you might know somebody that does. I'm here to tell you, man, I think Adam would be a great guy to talk about with anything. And he's not going to judge. He's not going to, it's going to be real comfortable. And I think he's massively helpful and easily one of the smartest guys I've ever been in the same room with. I mean, let's be honest. And cool, too.
And he's friends with us. Thumbs up.
Yeah. In spite of that, he has good judgment.
And so, like I said, over a year ago when I was on here, Spencer is the nicest guy in the world. Makes you feel like a rock star.
Hey, I call him like I see him.
He's the greatest.
So he can say all that, and I think that it's maybe like a 77% true.
Where can they find Freedom Hope online, though? Not everyone's going to be able to go to the
freedom-hope.com.
Well, right,
we're also on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitter now. We're excited about that. We're fixing to launch on Instagram. Got a whole lot of stuff going on, but really excited.
So keep an eye on our social media too. We'll link to it.
Yeah,
you do videos on Facebook too. Like you do your whole Sunday service on
So we used to, but we're now loading them on the website first, freedom-hope.com. But they load to YouTube as well. So every Sunday, and I really want to leave it at this point though, that like, you don't have to come see me. You don't have to talk to me. But the reality is, I don't know anybody that doesn't have something. And like, my heart is that we stop trying to do this whole figure it out on your own thing. Realize that, especially as Christians, the first thing God created that wasn't good is that man didn't have a helper fit. And all the animals and all the creation that had been made. So we're not designed to do life alone. And there's just so much on my heart about the reality with depression and anxiety. There's something every week seems like about a suicide. I just watched a video on Facebook, like some little kid said he liked Trump on the bus, and the whole bus jumped him and started physically beating him up. And like we're just at a place where we need to know that we don't have to do this thing alone. And if I'm not your cup of tea, I'm really okay with that. But there's great guys here, Spencer and Casey and Hunter, and I'm sure if you guys go to the Beacon House Live stuff, which is so much fun, I mean, you'd have a chance to talk to them, and they can connect you with somebody. It's important to me that if you want to come to Freedom Hope, we'd love to see you. But it's more important to me that you get in relationship with somebody who can bring you to a place that's better than the one you're at by yourself.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I can't think of a better way to close off.
I just want to put
Christmas.
my hands in the air and say, "Preach!" But you already did that. So
that was wonderful, and I am behind that 100%. And I'm not even going to try to. We should just end it on that note. Right
Merry
there.
Christmas, everybody.
Definitely want to say Merry Christmas to everybody from the Beacon House and all of our extended family, from Freedom Hope Church, from Awaken Church, from everybody that's been on the podcast. We hope you guys are having a safe and wonderful holiday, and we will be seeing you in the Roaring 20s.
Ooh.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animals.
Oh my.